Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she is open to renegotiating our constitution with her provincial counterparts. That comment was made as her Alberta Next panel met with the public. But what would reopening the constitution actually look like? What would it achieve? To help answer that, I'm joined now by David Schneiderman. He is a professor of constitutional law at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
So Premier Smith says she would be open to reworking the Constitution. Walk us through that process. First of all, what would that even look like?
Well, it's very difficult to do. We have one of the most difficult constitutions to amend in the world. It requires, in order to do any substantial change, 7 out of 10 provinces representing more than 50% of the population. So you need at least a substantial majority, including the province of Ontario or Quebec. Given the experience in the 1990s with constitutional reform, it's highly unlikely that provincial political leadership would want to experiment with any kind of constitutional amendment process.
What would be the end game here?
Well, it's not perfectly clear from the reporting about the meetings of this Alberta Next panel, because there are a number of gripes that Premier Smith is tabling and seemingly consulting, but also seemingly to provoke Alberta public opinion to follow her lead, having to do with things like an Alberta pension plan or Alberta provincial police, or having the federal government stay in its jurisdictional lane and not step on Alberta's toes. And lastly, complaints about equalization formula that we have in Canada that distributes funds to provinces that don't have the resources to provide public services of the same kind as in other provinces. And Alberta's already favored in that formula because only 50% of its oil revenue is calculated in that formula for redistribution through equalization.
Part of this Alberta Next panel is following on the heels of other discussions that are happening, outside of Premier Smith within the province of Alberta. And you hear the narrative a lot about we want what Quebec has, meaning sort of being seen as a distinct society or something, how they feel maybe a separate set of rules that applies to Quebec that doesn't apply to other provinces that they want access to. Would opening up the Constitution do that?
There's no need to open the Constitution to achieve those kinds of gains. A separate Quebec pension plan is something that was negotiated with the federal government. Many of the agenda items seem to be matters that would be negotiated bilaterally between the provincial government and federal government. It does not involve necessarily other provinces. Pulling Alberta out of the Canada pension plan is not so much a constitutional matter, but it would implicate the interests of citizens in other provinces. But it's not an amendment to the Constitution. As I said, it's so hard to do. We have such a rigid constitutional formula. The kinds of things that are on the agenda here seem to be matters that are politically negotiated. And the question will be whether Prime Minister Mark Carney is interested in playing footsie with Danielle Smith on these matters.
Yeah, we haven't seen really a response to that yet. And important to know that Premier Smith says she would be open to it. She's not looking to open it, which is an important distinction to make. And one that you said, she is appealing to these groups who are frustrated. Western alienation and these feelings are a real thing. There are separatist groups that are out there in the province. You were saying earlier off camera about, living in Alberta in the 90s when there was the sentiment that lived there as well. Do you see any parallels, or do you see an intensity now that didn't exist 30 years ago?
Well, it might be that voices are a little more vocal, and they're being led in the province by a premier who's willing to talk about such things, which was not the case in the 1990s when I lived in the province of Alberta. So there's always been this faction of the conservative movement in Alberta that wants, as you put it, what Quebec wants. And so, think that threatening separation will somehow bring the other players to the negotiation table. So it's perhaps a little more vocal because the premier is leading the province and talking about such matters and easing the rules for a province-wide referendum, which wouldn't have been the case in the 1990s. But of course, the matter of Western alienation we've heard about for decades. And you might recall during the almost 10-year reign of Stephen Harper, that really wasn't a complaint. And there was no constitutional, at least significant constitutional reform discussed during his tenure. There was some discussion about Senate reform, and federal government tried to do it unilaterally, and that never really went anywhere. So one thinks that perhaps a different election outcome federally would appease many of the vocal supporters for Western separation.
David Schneiderman, professor of constitutional law at the University of Toronto. Great conversation this morning. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.